are you?
The man you just saved, and the reason this town won't sleep tonight.
If she dies, I will burn this whole town to the ground. That's what he said. Damon Grayson, America's coldest billionaire. The man Forbes called too powerful to cross. He stood there, blood on his face, fury in his eyes, surrounded by a fleet of 500 black SUVs that had just rolled into a town too small to have its own stoplight. But this story isn't about him. It's about her. Amara Collins, a black waitress in a snow-dusted diner on the outskirts of Coyote Ridge, Wyoming, a place most folks couldn't find on a map and wouldn't bother if they could. She smiled through insults. She served coffee to men who called her girl like it was a slur. She mopped floors, they tracked dirt across. She was polite, invisible, unshakable. And then came the storm. The kind of storm that shuts down highways, grounds, planes, and dares anyone to step outside. Amara stayed to close up. The heat barely worked. The last customer had tossed a crumpled dollar bill on the counter and called her sweetheart, like it tasted bitter. She was turning off the lights when she saw him staggering, frostbitten, collapsing right outside her door. She didn't ask his name. She didn't ask where he was from or why he had a bleeding wound in his side. She just pulled him inside, laid him down in a booth, wrapped his hands in warm towels, stitched him up with the emergency kit from the back pantry. By dawn, the diner was surrounded. The same locals who'd barely tipped her the day before now watched in stunned silence as elite security teams locked down their town. And when Damon Grayson stepped outside and pointed to the woman who saved him, the woman they'd all ignored, everything changed. This isn't fiction. This is hidden worth. And this is a black story that cuts deeper than power or fame. If you're new here, take a breath, subscribe, and stay close. Because the story we're about to tell will rewrite everything you thought you knew about who matters in America. Before the blizzard, before the blood and the black SUVs, Amara Collins had already learned what it meant to be invisible in plain sight. She'd worked at that diner for 5 years. Same counter, same coffee pots, same customers, and yet, most people still didn't bother to learn her name. They just called her Miss if they were being polite, girl if they weren't. Some called her you people like she was part of a different species. In Coyote Ridge, being black meant you were always a question mark, a whisper, a joke told just loud enough to hear, but quiet enough to deny. Amara was used to it. She'd grown up in a nearby town where the school library had 2 black history books, both outdated, both on the bottom shelf, collecting dust. The diner was her full-time job, her only job, and her dream in disguise. She saved every dollar she could, hoping to one day buy it from the tired owner who barely showed up anymore. But tips were low, hours were long, and kindness was in short supply. Every day, Amara wiped ketchup off vinyl booths, while men twice her age asked if she had a boyfriend or someone looking out for her. When she said no, they smirked like that, gave them permission to try. A few months back, a tourist family stopped in during a road trip. The mother pulled her child closer when Amara approached, like her presence was danger. A week later, a group of teenage boys spray-painted something crude on the side of the diner. It stayed there for 3 days before anyone cleaned it off. No one apologized, no one cared. But Amara showed up anyway, hair neat, uniform clean, smile ready. Because she believed something they didn't, that being seen was only the beginning. Being remembered, that was the fight. Still, nights got heavy. Sometimes she cried in the back room, careful not to let the tears fall where customers might see. No one wanted to hear about struggle. They wanted refills. So when a half-dead white man collapsed outside her door that night, Amara didn't hesitate. Not because he deserved it, not because she owed anyone anything, but because, for once, she could choose who she wanted to be, not who they told her she was. And in that moment, Amara Collins chose to save a life. Even if the world outside had never tried to save hers. Damon Grayson opened his eyes to flickering light and the smell of coffee. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he was alive or hallucinating. The last thing he remembered was white, endless, crushing, white snow, swallowing the road, the trees, and finally him. His private jet had gone down somewhere outside the grid. He'd wandered for miles, bleeding, frozen, hunted. Then, nothing. Now, He was warm, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled like smoke and cinnamon, lying flat in what looked like a diner booth, the seat underneath him duct-taped and cracked at the edges. The ceiling fan above him squeaked with every turn, and across from him, sitting at the counter, was a woman. Young, black, hair pulled into a neat bun. Her apron was dusted with flour, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. "Thought you might sleep longer," she said without turning. Her voice was low, smooth, like someone used to long hours and little thanks. "You've been out most of the night." Damon tried to sit up, but pain stabbed through his ribs, and he let out a hiss. She turned now, finally, and walked toward him. "I wouldn't move too much," she added. "You're stitched, but not by a hospital. Just me and an old emergency kit." "Where am I?" he managed. "Coyote Ridge, Wyoming," she said simply. "My name's Amara. You're in my diner." He blinked. "Why?" "Because you collapsed on my doorstep with blood on your coat and ice in your hair," she said. "Didn't seem like the kind of thing you leave to the weather." Damon frowned. He didn't like not knowing where he was. He didn't like feeling weak, vulnerable, unarmed, and he especially didn't like not knowing who else knew he was here. "You could have called the police." "I didn't." "Why not?" She gave him a long look, not angry, just tired. "Because I've learned not every emergency needs a badge. Sometimes it just needs a human being to care." He didn't know how to respond to that, not when he was used to people running background checks before offering him water. "You don't know who I am." "No," she said, "and I don't need to. You were dying. That was enough." He lay back against the booth, eyes drifting to the window where the snow was still falling outside. And for the first time in years, Damon Grayson didn't feel like the richest man in the room. Just the luckiest. Amara didn't mean to snoop. She'd only gone back to the vestibule to fetch more firewood from the old bin near the door. The storm hadn't let up, and the wind screamed outside like it was trying to rip the town off the map. As she passed the coat rack, she noticed the duffel, black, expensive, half-zipped, and covered in a thin layer of snow that had melted into a dark, wet patch on the floor. She bent down, intending to move it closer to the heat so it would dry, but when she grabbed the handle, it shifted. Heavy. Heavier than any bag that size had a right to be. Curiosity tugged at her. She hadn't asked his name, hadn't questioned his story mostly because he hadn't offered one, but something about that bag felt loaded, in every sense of the word. She pulled the zipper open 2 inches, then 5. Cash. Stacks of it, neatly bundled, bound in paper bands. She recognized the federal bank seals, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, stuffed into the lining like laundry. Her heart skipped. Then she saw the second thing, a sealed envelope tucked inside a zip compartment. It was marked, classified. And beneath it, a sleek black laptop with a fingerprint scanner. She closed the bag quickly, too quickly. Behind her, a voice cut the silence. "Find anything interesting?" She turned fast, startled. Damon stood in the doorway of the diner kitchen, pale, bruised, gripping the door frame like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I wasn't," she started. "It's fine," he interrupted. "You're not the first person to look inside that bag. But you might be the first who didn't steal from it." She didn't respond. Damon walked slowly to the counter and sat down, wincing as he did. "My plane went down an hour before I made it here. I wasn't supposed to survive." Amara stayed quiet, waiting. "I was headed to testify," he said, "against people with real power, people who don't like cameras. That money was supposed to be the buyout to make it go away." He looked up at her. "I didn't take it." "Why not?" "Because for once in my life, I wanted to do the right thing." Amara folded her arms. "And what do you want now?" Damon's answer was simple. To stay alive, and maybe to find out why a woman this town treats like dirt decided my life was worth saving. At 6:12 a.m., the town of Coyote Ridge stopped breathing. The snow was still falling, thick and steady, but it didn't matter anymore. Something had shifted in the air. Amara Collins felt it before she saw it, a low, vibrating hum beneath her feet. A pressure in her chest, like the whole world was holding its breath. And then, the headlights came. One by one, black SUVs began snaking down the mountain road that led into town. Not 2 or 3, not even a dozen. By the time she stepped out onto the icy porch of her diner, there were nearly 50 identical vehicles, tinted windows, government-grade tires, moving in eerie formation. They didn't stop at the traffic lights, the two that still worked in town. They didn't slow down for the ice. They just came, controlled, silent, powerful. Amara stood in her apron, arms folded against the cold, watching them. She knew who they were here for. There was no other explanation. No other reason Coyote Ridge would suddenly look like the set of a high-budget political thriller. The first SUV stopped right in front of her diner. The door opened with surgical precision, and a tall man stepped out, dark-skinned, clean-cut, wearing a long coat over what looked like a bulletproof vest. His eyes scanned the building, then landed on her. "You must be Amara Collins," he said, calm as a surgeon but with the authority of someone who didn't ask twice. She nodded slowly, uncertain. Behind her, Damon Grayson was still asleep in the booth, completely unaware of the storm that had arrived to collect him. "I'm Miles King," the man said, head of security for Mr. Grayson. He didn't wait for a response. With a signal to his earpiece, the rest of the vehicles began to unload. Agents, medics, analysts, tactical response units, men in suits, and men in combat boots. They moved with coordinated precision, spreading out, setting up perimeters, sweeping the street, locking down every visible angle. And the townspeople, the same ones who barely acknowledged Amara's presence a day ago, now stood slack-jawed at their windows, watching as her diner became the epicenter of a national event. Miles looked back at her. "I need to see him, now." Amara stepped aside. But as she opened the door, she glanced once over her shoulder at the line of 500 black vehicles stretching past the horizon and realized something cold and final. Nothing would ever be normal again. By 7:15 that morning, Amara Collins was no longer invisible. The diner, once forgotten by everyone except hungry truckers and bored high schoolers, had become the epicenter of something far bigger than coffee and eggs. Satellite news vans lined the outer edge of the lot, their antennas rising into the pale Wyoming sky like question marks. Drones buzzed overhead. Cops, who had barely glanced at the place before, now stood guard at every corner with folded arms and radio chatter. Inside, everything was the same, and nothing was. The neon sign still flickered. The floor still creaked in that one spot near the jukebox. But Amara? She wasn't just a waitress anymore, at least not to them. Security teams moved around her like she was someone to be protected, briefed, monitored. Government agents asked if she needed anything: food, water, medical attention. She said no. She just kept pouring coffee. And yet, she felt more watched than seen. Locals crowded around the windows, pressed so close their breath fogged up the glass. Some held their phones up, recording everything. Others just stared, stunned, curious, hungry for whatever story this was becoming. Amara caught the eye of Mr. Doyle, the same man who once complained about the color of her lipstick. Now he stood outside the diner, hat in hand, nodding like she was royalty. She didn't nod back. At 8:22, she saw Miss Heather from the pharmacy, the one who never looked her in the eye, the one who always double-checked Amara's coupons like she was trying to catch her stealing. Heather mouthed something through the window. Amara couldn't tell if it was sorry or wow. Either way, she turned away. Then came the mayor again, this time with a photographer in tow. He handed her a paper bag with 2 blueberry muffins and said he knew she'd be too busy to eat. She accepted the bag. She didn't eat the muffins. Because what they were giving her now, the smiles, the compliments, the stares, they weren't kindness. They were curiosity wrapped in shame. Not one of them had said, "I was wrong." Not one had said, "I'm sorry." But they all wanted something. A photo, a handshake, a story to tell their friends, a piece of her moment. She stood behind the counter like always, her apron tied tight, her posture straight, and as the flashbulbs lit her face, Amara Collins held on to one truth like a secret. They didn't see her because she changed. They saw her because someone powerful told them she mattered. There are many ways to say "I'm sorry," and silence is not one of them. By noon, The energy in Coyote Ridge had shifted. What had started as excitement whispers about the man she saved, the money, the SUVs had turned into something else. Something quieter, heavier. A town doesn't change overnight, it just changes the way it looks at you. Now, when Amara Collins walked past, people didn't laugh, they didn't mock. They smiled tight, rehearsed smiles that never quite reached their eyes. They complimented her baking, her poise, her professionalism. As if those things were new. As if she hadn't been all those things before. As if saving a powerful white man's life was the first time she'd ever done anything of value. At 12:07 p.m., the waitress who used to be ignored was handed a bouquet of flowers by the president of the Chamber of Commerce. They were sunflowers, bright, tall, slightly wilted. She accepted them with a nod, said, "Thank you." She didn't ask why no one had ever brought her flowers when she worked double shifts in a storm, or when her car had been egged last year and no one offered to help clean it. The pastor dropped by at 12:30 with a gift card and a statement about how God works through ordinary people. But not one person said, "We were wrong about you." Not one. Even the sheriff who once accused her of stealing tips from the register gave her a firm handshake and told her she had done the community proud. As if they'd ever claimed her before now. Damon sat nearby, his expression unreadable, jaw tight. "They're not sorry," he said quietly. "They're scared. You were invisible. Now you're powerful. That makes them nervous." Amara didn't flinch. She didn't look up from where she was wiping the counter, slow and steady. "I don't need an apology," she said. "Not from people who only see me when I'm next to someone they respect." And that was the truth. She hadn't spent years fighting to be seen, just to accept pity wrapped in politeness. She didn't want photo ops or headlines. What she wanted, what she'd always wanted, was to be treated like she mattered, even when she wasn't part of someone else's story. So she served their coffee, filled their orders, smiled when it was expected, and quietly held on to the truth that dignity never required their approval. It only ever required her own. The diner was dark except for the soft glow of the overhead lights and the amber flicker from the coffee warmer. It was the first time in days that the world had slowed down. No reporters, no SUVs pulling in with blinding lights, just quiet. Snow tapped lightly against the windows. The kind of sound you barely notice unless you're really listening. Amara sat at her usual booth, the one closest to the kitchen. Damon sat across from her, his bandages freshly changed, his frame a little less tense. He was still healing body and spirit both, but something in his shoulders had loosened. Something about the way he looked at her had shifted. "I used to think survival was about staying ahead of everyone," Damon said quietly. "Get richer, get smarter, move faster." But that night, in the snow, none of it mattered. Amara sipped her tea. It wasn't fancy, just the cheap stuff in the break room box, but it was hot and steady. Like her. "What did matter?" she asked. He looked down for a moment, fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "That someone saw me," he said. "Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, just as a man, bleeding, lost." Amara smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides its own bruises. "That's funny. I've spent my whole life trying to be seen as more than the uniform I wear. But in this town, that's all they ever see." Damon nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why we understand each other." They sat in silence for a bit, listening to the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old building settling. The kind of quiet that felt full, not empty. "I grew up in foster homes," Damon said finally. "Bounced around for years, learned to read people before they opened their mouths. It kept me alive, but it also made me cold." "You're not cold," Amara said. "You're just used to not being safe." That stopped him. He looked at her, and for the first time since they met, his eyes softened without walls behind them. "I didn't expect this," he admitted. "Neither did I," she replied. "But I'm glad it happened." "So am I." And just like that, the storm outside became background noise. For one brief moment, it wasn't about what they had survived. It was about what they were allowing themselves to feel, something unexpected, something neither had planned for. A beginning. They never expected the second strike to come so soon. After all the chaos, the convoys, the media buzz, and the lockdown-level security, everyone had started to breathe again. Not relax, no one around Damon Grayson ever fully relaxed, but at least breathe. The agents had reduced their visible presence to avoid drawing more attention. Damon insisted it was safer that way. Amara had started baking again, something simple to calm her nerves. The smell of cornbread and cinnamon had filled the air, making the diner feel like it was finally hers again, even for just a moment. Then, at 10:42 p.m., everything unraveled. It started with the lights, not all at once, just in small, quiet bursts. A flicker here, a blackout there. Power cut clean, silently. Amara had seen enough bad movies to know what came next. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the front windows. Damon stood near the back, pacing slowly to keep his legs moving after days of recovery. He looked up, immediately alert. "Where's security?" She reached for her phone. No signal. Dead. That's when the front door shattered. A blast not from a rock or a baseball, but from a breaching charge. Smoke poured in through the broken frame as two figures in tactical gear stormed through the opening. Rifles raised and fingers steady. Amara didn't hesitate. She grabbed Damon by the arm and pulled him hard behind the counter, both of them dropping fast, just as bullets tore through the booths where they'd been standing seconds earlier. The gunfire wasn't random. It was tight, controlled. These people were professionals. The emergency exit. The kitchen. She yanked him toward it, half dragging, half running. Shots followed them through the narrow hallway as they burst through the swinging kitchen doors. Amara's eyes found the drawer beneath the prep counter, the one with her late father's old revolver, hidden beneath the faded manuals and unopened ketchup packets. She pulled it free, checked the chamber. Loaded. As the back door burst open, a man stepped into the kitchen, full black tactical gear, face masked, laser sight aimed directly at Damon. Amara fired first. The shot echoed like thunder. The man crumpled. She didn't wait to see if he would move again. She grabbed Damon and ran through the snow-covered field behind the diner, her boots slipping, her chest heaving. They didn't stop until they hit the tree line, where darkness swallowed them whole. Damon dropped to one knee, gasping for breath. He looked at her like she was something he'd never seen before. "You just saved both of us." Amara's voice was steady. "Get used to it." And behind them, their safe haven burned. The next morning, there was nothing left of the diner but smoke and ash. The walls had caved in. The counter was a pile of charred wood. The booths where people had once whispered behind Amara's back were nothing but scorched outlines in the rubble. Everything she had built, every memory, every late shift, every dollar saved to buy the place outright gone in one night. But Amara Collins stood in front of the wreckage with her back straight and her chin high. No tears. Not yet. Damon stood beside her, his arm in a sling, bandages showing beneath his shirt. His eyes scanned the ruin like it was personal. And it was. "This is on me," he said quietly. "They came for me. They burned your life down to send a message." Amara shook her head. "They burned it down because I wouldn't run." That changed something in his face, respect, maybe, or recognition. Like he'd finally understood she wasn't the one who needed protecting. She was the reason he was still standing. Later that day, Damon held a press conference from the front steps of the town courthouse. National media tuned in. Every camera lens turned toward the man who disappeared in a snowstorm and reappeared with a waitress by his side. Only he didn't call her that. "She's not just the woman who saved my life," Damon said. "She's a symbol of everything this country forgets to value: compassion, resilience, and strength that doesn't come with a title." He paused, looked directly into the cameras. "This is not just about security or revenge. This is about rebuilding. Not just brick and mortar, but how we treat each other, what we choose to honor, what we choose to ignore." And then he did something no one expected. He announced the launch of a new foundation, the Collins Initiative, dedicated to rebuilding small businesses destroyed by hate, violence, or neglect. The first project? A new diner. In Amara's name. Not in the outskirts of town this time, but in the heart of the city. The announcement made headlines. Donations poured in. Politicians called. Celebrities tweeted. But none of that mattered as much as the moment Amara stepped onto the new lot 2 weeks later. Blueprint in hand, hard hat tucked under her arm. She looked around at the workers, the trucks, the steel beams rising toward the sky. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement. She wasn't rebuilding the same old diner. She was creating something bigger. Something they couldn't burn down. 1 year after the fire, after the gunfire and the smoke, after the headlines and the silence, Amara Collins stood beneath the morning sun and unlocked the doors to something she built with her own hands. Amara's light. The gold letters above the glass doors shimmered in the sunrise like they were lit from within. But the name wasn't about fame or ego. It was about memory. About the moment she stopped waiting to be seen and started choosing to be seen on her own terms. The new diner sat in the center of the city, now a prime location, just 3 blocks from downtown. The spot had once been a parking lot. Now it was a landmark. From the outside, it looked sleek, modern, floor-to-ceiling windows, clean brick, outdoor seating with little planters that changed with the seasons. But inside, it still felt like home. The floors were warm wood, the booths hand-stitched in deep red leather. One corner held the only piece from the original diner that survived, a scorched wooden stool, polished clean, placed on display under soft lighting. Beneath it, a plaque read, "She never needed a throne, just a place to stand." Amara hired her staff herself. She didn't look at resumes. She listened to stories. Every server, every cook, every dishwasher had been overlooked somewhere else. Too old, too young, too different, too bold. Here, they were the heartbeat of something real. And the people came. Locals, tourists, strangers, and regulars. They didn't just come for the food, though the biscuits were still legendary. They came for the feeling, for the welcome, for the space to be exactly who they were, no permission needed. Amara didn't wear the apron anymore, not daily, but when someone called out, or when she felt the pull, she'd slide behind the counter and pour coffee like she always had. Her smile hadn't changed. Only now, people looked her in the eye when she wore it. At 9:17 a.m., Damon walked in. No security, no announcement, just him, in jeans and a flannel shirt, a man who used to command boardrooms but now looked most at peace in a booth with a view of the street. He slid into their usual spot and waited until she sat down across from him. "You ever miss the old place?" he asked. Amara glanced around. The sun hit the windows just right. Laughter echoed from the kitchen. The scent of cinnamon and butter floated through the air. "Sometimes," she said, "but only for the fight it took to get here." And in that moment, she realized something. Her light hadn't started with the fire. It had started the day she refused to let someone die in the cold even when the world had let her. If there was one thing Amara Collins had learned, it was this. Being good does not guarantee you'll be seen. You can be kind, you can work hard, you can do everything right, and still the world might look past you. It's not fair, it's not poetic, it's just real. But what you do with that truth, that's what defines you. Amara never wanted to be famous. She never set out to prove a point. All she did that snowy night was follow her gut, a quiet decision in the dark. She opened her door to a stranger. Not because it was safe, not because it would change her life, but because in that moment, it was right. And that, she would tell you now, is where the real power lives. Not in the headlines, not in the convoy of black SUVs, not in the donations or the applause, but in the small, everyday choices no one sees. The moment you hold the door for someone who never held it for you. The moment you choose mercy instead of mockery. The moment you help someone not because they deserve it but because they need it. That's the light no one can take from you. In a world obsessed with status and surface, Amara's story reminds us that character still matters, that dignity is something you build from the inside out. That power rooted in compassion is stronger than anything built on fear. So, maybe you've never pulled someone from the snow. Maybe you've never had your diner burned down. Maybe you've never faced a crowd that only started seeing you after someone else gave them permission. But if you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever questioned your worth, if you've ever wondered whether doing the right thing matters when no one is watching, it does. It always has. And if you believe that, truly believe it, then maybe, just maybe, this world still has a fighting chance. This has been a story from Hidden Worth, a space where we don't chase headlines. We chase truth. We chase heart. We chase the kind of stories that remind us what it means to be human. If this story spoke to you, if it lit even the smallest spark inside, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone else needs to hear it too. And maybe, they need to be seen.